has the world gotten smaller or bigger with the introduction of social media? And because I don't know, do people
It's
have
both.
those stories more
I think
today than they had before?
That's a good point. And so I think if I look at it from a distribution curve, I think there should be, given the state of circumstances, there are going to be some people that are going to be hungry as a result of that. So I think what's going to happen is you're going to have a large number of food banks. This is a time where we'll really be tested as to how much we care about our fellow human being, our fellow country person.
Look, to have this happening in the month of November, let me just say this first. To have it, because this is what comes to my mind first and comes to my heart first. To have this happening in the month of November is just absolutely just tragic, because
Thanksgiving, bro? Come on.
You could do this in any month and it's tragic, right? I mean, it's not to say it's not tragic in any month, but to do this in Thanksgiving is absolutely just craziness, because it's pathetic, really. I mean, it's really pathetic at this point, because how on earth can anyone starve in the United States of America? How the hell did we get 40 million Americans dependent on food stamps? Given the opportunity we have in America, it makes no sense to me. Poland just announced that a zero income tax to families with 2+ children on the first $140,000 of income. Poland.
Wow.
That's pretty interesting. You know, and an absolute pure system, like you were saying earlier, never works. A pure systems, nothing pure ever works. Or just like pure democracy never works, right?
Correct.
There are certain human beings in the world today that live in Western countries and live in civilized areas of the world that are animals. And they need to stay in those areas of the world because we don't want the animals here.
Yeah.
And I know it's a very inhumane way to talk about it, but when someone stabs someone on a train without any remorse or disregard, it just walks away, that's an animal.
Okay.
That is an animal. Right? So I mean,
I just think that it's real problematic to use dehumanizing language for any human being on any circumstances. That it's imperative to be conscientious about the words you use, because other people who aren't as informed as you, who aren't as educated as you, can use that as a way to justify hurting and killing and doing things to other people, because America's has had a history of that. And when I say America, I'm talking about people within America. People have been, shot and killed that are innocent. They didn't do anything. 79% of suicides in the United States are men, according to CDC in 2025. Men aged 30. Did you hear what I just said? 79%.
Whoa.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yes. When I saw that figure, it blew my mind.
That is crazy.
Yes, exactly. And I believe with my entire being that people are taking their lives because they're comparing themselves through the lens of somebody else's life that's only giving you a piece of it.
My son, Emery, posts a lot, and he did like a dump, like a monthly or a weekly dump.
Okay.
And there's somebody and he's 14. Somebody commented, the top comment was, "Your life is so much more better than compared to mine." And I sat and I read that and I was like, dang, that's some deep stuff there, dude.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So is it too much choice and too much comparing? If you want to stay happy and healthy, you got to have a strong family unit. You got to have a strong household.
When you talk about the importance of rekindling relationships, I think sometimes kids look at their parents and some of the transgressions and evil things they did. If you can find it in your heart, if you're a child of an aging parent, I want you to imagine for a second that parent passed away.
Welcome to the Family Office. Planning for the people who matter most.
Sounds good, man. Hey, I like it. I like it.
So when you seen that, you knew it was either going to be that or it's going to be like Keith Sweat or something like that.
I thought it was going to be some black guy. I was like, maybe young Denzel or something like that. I don't know. I was like, because since I don't party, it's not going to be me. So it's going to be somebody else.
I'm shocked, but I'm not shocked that you'd shortchange yourself like that and go Denzel. I could have sworn you'd go more Eddie Murphy or Keith Sweat. They're way better looking than
Oh man.
Denzel.
Okay. Keith. Okay.
Denzel
So
just has that political star power look, like
he's got the wisdom. He's got the, like back in the day, man, Denzel, if you said Denzel's name among sisters back in the 90s, he was the man. And so I would say Eddie was during the 80s. Keith Sweat, not so much, man, because like he had some real bangers, but he was a one-hit wonder. No disrespect, Keith, if you're watching this. You have some good songs, but nah, after that one hit, man, he was done. He had one good album, I should say. In fact, what's interesting? I had a client years and years ago that was getting ready to get married to Keith Sweat and was getting ready to move to Atlanta to go connect, man. So, little fun fact.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
That is cool. That is wild. Right
yeah. And she was definitely striking, man. No doubt about it. So for sure. So I was like, okay, Keith, got her. She was a lot younger, but she definitely was a star power kind of a look, if I'll put it that way.
What I find very fascinating and very interesting is that someone always from that era, like my mom could tell the story about how she hung out with like the Rockettes and she was almost ready to go sing with like this famous band and everything. It's like someone always has a story like about that somehow from that era. And it makes me pose the question of, has the world gotten smaller or bigger with the introduction of social media? And because I don't know,
it's both.
Stories more
I think it's
than they had before.
That's a good point. I think it's both. I think it's gotten smaller from the standpoint that back in the day there were a lot fewer people that were making it, and so if you were connected to that person, then there's a likelihood that way more people knew that person. Like, for example, back when I was young, it was Michael Jackson versus Prince, right? And so, if somebody knew somebody that was connected to Michael Jackson's family and stuff like that, which is not the case in my situation. But, like back then there were like 2 or 3 major stars and then you had, another 6 or 7 stars. But now you've got, hundreds, if not thousands of them, because social media, you've got different podcast stars and you have musical stars and then OnlyFans stars and then, comedy, social media stars and political stars, right? So there's so many more categories of people. So in that way, social media has really expanded the opportunities for a lot more people to become well known.
Yeah, almost feels like now it's very diluted where before it's like they're an influencer. You're like, where are they an influencer? Oh, they're a Twitch influencer, or they're big on Twitch, and it's just like, oh wow, because there's just so many different mediums and so many different platforms now that someone can monetize. And then, I mean, obviously that's just the site of what capitalism does as a whole, is that there's a place for you to make money. I mean, that's really all there is to it. But you're absolutely right. Back in the day, it was big. It was a big deal. Like, oh my God, that's a star, right?
Right.
Like a movie star or a music star or a sports star, right? And then that was it. And now it's like so many different genres. And like even the case with that singer that was almost could potentially look like it was in hot water, but I guess now he's not in hot water the way it all landed down. The D4DME guy, David.
Oh, yes, in the Tesla. Yes.
Yeah. I didn't even know who he was, and he's like huge.
Never heard of him.
Big.
Yes.
He's big, right? Like massive.
But is that because we're getting old, or just because there's so many stars? It might be a little bit of both.
I don't know. I think I don't want to say it's the old thing, because that's a very I know that's a very baby boomer thing to say. Like I'm not getting old, right? Like this is, but I don't know. I'm pretty up to date on that kind of stuff, and I have young kids. So I want to say that I'm getting the information correctly, but I could be wrong, because you're absolutely right. Age could be putting up that filter where you're like, I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense. And you start to do that subconsciously. But I think that's where you got to kind of hack your brain and you got to really like force yourself to understand and learn the new stuff, because you don't want to get outdated. You don't want your skills to get outdated.
Absolutely.
But there's probably a lot of stuff that I don't watch. But right now, like for example, K-pop Demon Hunters is like everything. Like everything is about that in my house, my kids. Like everything is about that stuff. So much so that it almost caused a Halloween costume kerfuffle in the fact that these kids waited to the last minute because they wanted to be K-pop Demon Hunters, but you can't find that stuff. So now they just watched Pirates of the Caribbean and got re-inspired by the classics, and now they're all going to be pirates of some sort. So it all worked out in the end anyways.
Well, that's good. At least, hey, you've got to be resourceful when you've got 7 kids, man, all vying for the same type of costume. They changed the market just from your family.
They sure did. So interrelates to current affairs, and obviously we've talked about government shutdown, and I think this is just massive right now. I don't even think we were going to talk about this, but today, or we even thought about this, but this is just I just want to bring it up because I think it's massive, and it goes back to what we've been talking about, which is we're still shut down, right? Like the government is still shut down. Okay. And I think what the biggest crisis point right now, and I'm curious to see the dialogue for you on this one is no one's getting EBT or SNAP in November.
Started November 1st. Yep.
So because the deadline was the 23rd of October, and obviously the government was still shut down. So as a result now, I think it was like 20% somewhat in 2024 of Americans were on SNAP or food stamps or EBT or whatever it's called.
Was it that high? Sheesh.
I want to say I seen something like that. I want to see while you check that, Len, I want to say I seen something like that in a survey that it was estimated at the top end was 21% or 20, somewhere that number was referenced recently. And that's just crazy to me because now you have a massive amount of people that are not going to receive those benefits or receive because of the government shutdown. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. I didn't know that the government had such a big impact. I thought it was that it was taken care of by local municipalities or by the state. I didn't realize that because I know coming from California, they have like one of the largest, most advertised EBT SNAP food stamps programs. I don't know if you got a number or not, but Len, where are you at with that? Because that's pretty big. It's a big thing deal.
That's huge. So according to Google, so let's, keep that in perspective. 12.3% of Americans were on SNAP as of 2024, which is 41.7 million people per month receiving benefits. That's a huge number. 20% or 12%, the number's almost 42 million people. And it's probably close to that now, considering that we're a year out. And
that's like the entire state of California.
Yes.
The entire state of California.
That is huge. Wow. That's huge. That's a huge number. And I think, with anything, there's a distribution curve. So there's you've got the outliers of people that are there because they're just manipulating the system. You've got the in the middle part where most of them have some type of short-term need because they lost a job and they're needing to take care of their kids. And then you've got others that are just in a real, bad situation. And no matter what, because of their health or their mental status, and maybe they're not mentally equipped to be able to get a job, they really do need that assistance. And so I think if I look at it from a distribution curve, I think there should be, given the state of circumstances, there are going to be some people that are going to be hungry as a result of that. So I think what's going to happen is you're going to have a large number of food banks that start to work overtime. Like, for example, my dad actually has a food bank. He has a homeless ministry. And during COVID, a lot of the churches and the food banks closed down. He decided to stay open. And as a result of that, all of the places that were distributing food to those locations are now putting food at his place. And so I think because of the fact that there's still food being grown, there's still food being produced, I think those places are really, really going to be overrun. And I think the best of us as it relates to offering our time and our services to volunteer during this time. This is a time where we'll really be tested as to how much we care about our fellow human being, our fellow country person that's really going through things. Because if a person's taking advantage of the system, they're using it to game the system, they're not going to go to a shelter to go get food. A person who's looking short term, they've probably been looking for work already. And so hopefully they'll find something sooner than later. But it's those ones that are really in a dire situation where if they don't get their food stamps, they're not going to eat. It's those folks that we really need to reach out and give a helping hand and make sure that they know of a local food bank, a local food distribution center, so we can make sure that they're taken care of. Because I will tell you, because my father's in that space, I know he's definitely going to be impacted. So what you're talking about really impacts me personally, because I sit on his board.
Well, I have to look at this and think of this from two different brains or two different perspectives, because I look at this pragmatically and I also look at this empathetically. And I don't know where to start with it, but I'll just look. To have this happening in the month of November, let me just say this first. To have it, because this is what comes to my mind first and comes to my heart first. To have this happening in the month of November is just absolutely just tragic, because
Thanksgiving, bro? Come on.
You could do this in any month and it's tragic, right? I mean, it's not to say it's not tragic in any month, but to do this in Thanksgiving is absolutely just craziness, because it's pathetic, really. I mean, it's really pathetic at this point, because how on earth can anyone starve in the United States of America? That's where I just get so mad from my gut reaction of just like, there's so much bounty in this country that no one should starve. Like, that's where I'm just like, I'm sickened by it, because the amount of profit that the country generates off of the resource that we can produce goes beyond what any citizen and all citizens need to survive and live a healthy life. Like, I mean, like $250,000, $300,000 a year income. Like, the United States of America is very wealthy, but it's just so ass backwards the way things are done, and politicians pretty much, I don't want to get into that. So to me, it's just asinine that we're in a situation like this and we can't pass a freaking budget.
Because they're not incentivized, because they're getting paid still.
And again, these asswipes are getting paid, right? Your elected officials, like, seriously. But the reality here is then I go to the other half of me and I go, how the hell did we get 40 million Americans dependent on food stamps? Given the opportunity we have in America, it makes no sense to me. Given the opportunity in America today, it makes absolute zero sense to me that we have that many people. So there I look at it pragmatically and go, this is a freaking wake-up call for us to clean the freaking books on food stamps and SNAP. What a blessing at the same time, right? You got to look at this in a positive light too, because we shouldn't even need to have anybody on food stamps. And that's my point with the harsh point. Many people go, but you understand, it's hard times, Chris. I get it. I know that. I'm completely okay with it. That safety social net should be there because America produces so much bounty. It should be there for any citizen to take free of charge without any guilt. You just shouldn't be reliant on it. And that's where I go, whoa. So I look at it from those two perspectives, because I can't believe we have this many people dependent on the teat. But at the same time, I can't believe that us as a country can't get our priorities straight, that we have citizens of the United States of America starving when we're happily losing $20 billion in certain states for people that are here illegally. So it just makes zero sense to me why we can't get those priorities straight. But I get it, the special interest stuff, and we talked about that. But at the bare minimum, to me, and this is going to sound very weird for people who know and have listened to us for a minute, and even for you, Len, I really just look at it at an empathetic standpoint first and foremost to say, can we please not let people starve during Thanksgiving? We have enough things to be depressed about and to be nervous about. Can't we just enjoy one flippin' day where you guys aren't arguing over there in that nice stone place that we pay for called the Capitol building? I'll say less.
Yeah.
It's very upsetting. Mm-hmm. It's so upsetting that we have this type of problem in the United States of America.
I agree. And I think it goes back to what we talked about on previous episodes, which is the fact that they're not incentivized to move quickly because they're still getting paid. I bet you if they weren't getting a paycheck during this closure, they would come to consensus a lot faster. Another thing that I wanted to bring out about what you just talked about. So as I mentioned before, roughly 42 million people will be without food stamps roughly. But when you look at the number of jobs, there are only about 7.2 million jobs available right now. So you've got 40 million people who need it. Now, of course, they're, children that are part of it and stuff like that. So obviously that number is not going to equate exactly, but there are more people than there are jobs available. And so there's always going to be that discrepancy in a capitalistic system. And so we understand that. And that's the reason why all capitalistic systems must have some element of socialism in it. And for those of you that are listening to that statement, you say, no, we're purely capitalistic. No, we're not. We're not a purely capitalistic system, because otherwise you'd be paying for your own roads and your own sewage and all of those things. So we have to collectively bring our tax base together so we can have a civilized and advanced society. A socialistic collective approach to that is the most efficient and most effective way to do that. And so going back to your point, and I'll wrap up, is that when you have women and children that need these services going hungry around Thanksgiving, I've got a real problem with that, just like you do. And I think that some way, somehow, there has to be some quick, swift resolution to make sure people don't go hungry. I look at food stamps for some people, or EBTs, whatever you call them now, is an essential. Eating is essential. So if you can't consider that an essential service, I don't know what is. So that's where I stand with that, man.
I just can't understand anybody starving or dying in the United States of America. It just makes absolutely zero sense to me.
100%.
So that to me, I don't get. So I just thought it was interesting to talk about that and bring that up as a side note on what we've talked about, just simply because it's happening here and I don't get it. It's happening here and I just don't understand it. So kind of on the topic of resource, because I mean, governments and institutions, I mean, at the end of the day, it's about the people controlling them and human nature. And that's why the United States Constitution is so powerful, because the United States Constitution is evergreen, because it governs human nature. The United States Constitution was explicitly written to govern human nature, because that's the one thing the founding fathers or the forefathers or whatever the heck you want to call it, the original mofos and mo daddies and mofo ladies that were here, that were at the beginning of the step thing. And because I know there's a lot of guys that get a lot of history, but there's some women behind those guys that made them get out of bed and not be lazy. Because ultimately, guys are pretty much lazy when they don't have women driving them a lot. So, that all guys know that.
It's going to be an interesting topic. I want to talk a little bit about that.
But at any rate, this is interesting because Poland just announced that a zero income tax to families with 2+ children on the first $140,000 of income. Poland.
Wow.
That's pretty interesting to see and understand, because most people that like socialism or communism that fall in love with the romanticism, because ultimately everything has a romantic side to it. So capitalism, I just think, is the most romantic, sexiest out of all of them. That's why it works the best, because it takes care of you at home the most. It treats you like your mama the most at home, and then it takes you out in the streets. Like the age-old cliche, a lady in the streets and a freak in the sheet. Like that. That is capitalism. Capitalism happens to be the best one of all of them. It's the most loyal out of all the mistresses, out of all the systems, right? But to see someone, in an absolute pure system, like you were saying earlier, never works. A pure systems, nothing pure ever works. So it's just like pure democracy never works, right?
Correct.
But to see, like, most people, Poland and Finland, all those countries in those areas of the world, they're the socialist and communist country. They do it right. Well, most people will be shocked. Look at this. I'm curious to know what your take is on that. If you go to Poland and you have 2 children, the first $140,000 is free and clear, baby. Like, let's go now. Most people would look at that and be very attractive, because for someone who's making $140,000 in the United States of America, and say the state of California, the state of New York, that's a very brutal tax bracket to be in.
No doubt about it.
On that one, sir.
Okay, so I've given this some thought because I have a few conflicting perspectives that might seem a bit contradictory. So on the one hand, I look at this idea of paying families to have babies as really, really problematic, because I think of some families that I've seen, because, you know, me being the school principal, I've seen a lot of different types of families come to our schools and our school district. In fact, when I was working there, I was in like the 7th largest school district in America. It's really big. And so it's either in the state or in America. But anyway, it was a large school district, hundreds and thousands of kids there. And so I worked at the district level. I've worked at the school level. I've worked at the class level. And so I've had a chance to meet a lot of different types of families. And I will tell you, there were some large families that had no business having extra kids. It was not good for the family. So when I think of being incentivized to have more children, I think about that. Now, when I think about what China has gone through, what America is starting to go through, I can understand why a country would be willing to invest in its future, because without a growing population, you're going to either have a brain rot as the citizenry gets older, because your production and your productivity is going to go down. And that's what we see right now happening in China. Now, the only thing that's going to be the saving grace for China is they're over 1 billion people, so they're going to be fine. But, you know, Hungary is also doing something similar. They're offering lifetime tax exemption for mothers that have 4 or more children. Lifetime tax exemption. So, as I was saying, on the one hand, I have a problem with that. But on the other hand, I understand, because when you look at continents like Africa, they're one of the youngest continents in the world, and they're projected to be the next continent that has its major economic revolution because of all of the young minds that are being cultivated right now, especially when you think about AI and the globalization of information and access to information and how inexpensive that is. I think for a country to invest in and incentivize their citizens to have more kids for the betterment of their future, I think it makes a lot of sense. So where I fall on that is net, I think it makes sense, but I think there should be some type of criteria. Like, for example, in order to get this tax break, you have to work in certain sectors within the economy, so that now we know that you're contributing to it. And now you can incentivize them to have more kids, but also find employment in places that actually bring revenue and value to that particular country. Because even in the United States, right now, the United States, we're only at 1.62 below replacement, meaning that there's a shrinking labor force that's getting ready to happen. And so if we don't find ways to either socially incentivize, or, you know, like, for example, when we started to run these commercials and against smoking, it worked. Smoking decreased sharply. And I think we've got to find ways here in America to improve upon the number of children that people are having, because really at the end of the day, Chris, the people that are younger, they're saying it's too expensive to live. You know, like, for example, you and I were talking offline, and when you told me how much money you spend every month just on food, that's more than most. In fact, the median income of our lowest earning population is 48 grand. That's how much you spend on food, bro. So it's expensive to have kids. And so I'll stop rambling because I'll go on a whole nother tangent because I had 2 kids in college at the same time. And that was 90 grand a year.
Whew. The numbers are absolutely staggering when you look at it. And we've talked about this a lot. I remember giving meetings, and there's so much to unpack here, but I mean, I don't want to lose the train of thought as I backtrack. But I remember giving meetings in 2020, 2019, 2021, and saying, look, if you are not making, I remember before COVID saying, if you're not making $250,000, $300,000 a year, it's going to be very rough for you.
Especially if you have kids.
Right. And then I remember during COVID, I would say, look, if you're not making 300,000 or more, you're feeling inflation. I would argue to say right now that even if you're making $500,000 a year or more, or I'd say right around $500,000, if you're in that spot and you got a family of 4, life is expensive for you. Because to live comfortably in California, it is surveyed to say you need $277,000 a year.
That's right.
But even at that, I'm like, how can you live comfortably with a family of 4 at 277? Maybe if it's just you,
if your house is paid off, maybe that'd be the only way. Yeah.
Maybe, right? Because then you look at mortgage rates, right, today. But like, so just thinking about that and going back with it, it's like so you're looking at it and saying, okay, we're incentivizing people to have children. Right. Because the birth rates are declining. And it's fascinating to me because most people, I remember, I don't know if you remember this, you probably do. The argument was like, oh my God, the human population is out of control. We're going to overcrowd the planet and kill the planet because there's too many of us.
I remember that. Yes.
Every single problem that man has come up with, and I say that like the man-made problems, like the stuff we advertise, like I know a lot of people are going to get mad about the climate change is one of them, I think. Like all these man-made farces like that, like, they're all farces. They're all industry farces. Like the overpopulation of the world never materialized. At this point now, it's an epidemic because most biggest countries in the world have population declining problems because people don't want to have sex anymore. Because either it's too expensive or the food they're eating doesn't even make them want to get up and have sex anymore.
Or they're going to the abortion clinic, or they're
state-sponsored abortion,
or the contraception is, so it's a big thing for sure.
So realistically, if you look at the issue with most population, I think it's just all as a result of human meddling, either organized programs like you saw with Chairman Mao in China, right? The two children law, right? Population control there. And now you're seeing the result of that, right? Or you have crazy sterilization things that are sterilization that's happening right in front of all of us in the United States with the polyester and synthetic pants that we make our young men wear, the diets, like the hormone disruptors, the endocrine disruptors that people eat, the food stuff that we've talked numerous times about. And then obviously the culture where we confuse the hell out of kids when they're young now. We don't know what's a boy and what's a girl. And then we make young men ashamed that they have feelings, and we make girls think it's okay to sell themselves. And then we desensitize it with the overproduction of stimulants that everyone has nonstop 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's no wonder no one wants to have sex anymore and no one wants to touch anybody anymore. And then to get that, kids don't even know how to talk to each other offline anymore. They're so socially awkward with amongst each other. But I can tell you, Len, with the food thing, and I'm not trying to like brag or anything like that. I'm just scientific study, because I tell people all the time, I scientifically studied myself. I experimented on myself. And then once I knew it was safe, then I experimented on my children. And not like I put them in a test tube.
Right.
Look, I knew I wasn't crazy, but I knew the world was crazy. So then I started going back and doing the research and listening to the other sources that were getting banned. And it was like, you know what? Stop frying in oil. Start frying in tallow and butter. Use butter and use full fat. And it's just changing all this stuff, and eat meat and eat vegetables and eat paleo style, Mediterranean style. And I did that, and I switched myself. And then all of a sudden I watched my health improve and my biomarkers improve. And then I did it to my kids. And yes, it's expensive. I spend about $1,000 to $1,200 a week on groceries. But then again, I'm not bragging or anything, but then I look at it and I look at my kids in public, or I look at my kids in social settings, and I look at my boys, especially, you see it, especially in the boys. And I go, my kids, dude, they look like freaking Olympic athletes. Like, they're crazy the way they look. Like, and they don't go to the gym every day. They don't. They don't. But these kids, and it's because of the diet. And you can't tell me it's not. You cannot tell me that the diet doesn't make absolutely 80% of the difference, because I see it before my eyes. I see it. The moods, the sleeping habits, like all these big problems that they talk about kids having today, the ADHD, the sleeping problems, grades, behavioral problems. I don't have any of those. Thank God I don't. But I can tell you right now, Len, with confidence, that a lot of it has to do with the diets and the foods that these kids eat. 100%. And I think that that's a big problem that we don't talk about. So at any rate, I know kids don't eat properly, and we're talking about that now with budgeting and that type of stuff. So it's just baffling to me that anybody cannot see that correlation today. But I think it's good. I think it's good for them to promote that. And it's interesting to see, like you mentioned, Hungary doing it. It's these countries giving incentives, I think. And what do you think? It might incentivize wealthy people from America or wealthy people from westernized countries. I think it's also incentivizing these countries to cracking the code to attract people like that. Wealthy people that want to make families and build families in Western countries are going to go to those countries, are going to migrate to those countries because they have the means to do it. And now they're free to do it. They get tax breaks, and they're going to bring productive value, cultural value to those countries and rebirth those countries. You're going to see a renaissance, I think, maybe in a lot of countries that are incentivizing wealthy Western people to move to those countries. I don't know. I think I see that trend happening with that as a result. Because you see a lot of countries doing it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like when you look at what happened in Singapore between the 50s and the 80s, they had a real big surge in productivity. And I think when you go back to countries like Finland and Hungary and other European countries, having an incentive to attract the right people is something that I think will create unintended consequences. And this is what I mean by that. I think if you have large numbers of people from around the world go to these traditionally smaller economies, they would have to put some type of guardrail on that, because you'd have an influx of people from all around the world that would flock to places like that. And I don't know if they'd be ready for that. Like, for example, Brexit was a big issue where you had these large numbers of immigrants that would come in and take a lot of the jobs that people who were domestic were vying for. And they got upset about that. And that's why they left. That was one of the big reasons why they left the European Union. So I don't know if that's the answer, because I think countries should have incentives for people within their own borders. Because if you look at it, a lot of the conflicts that countries have around the world is around this whole issue of immigration. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm very much pro-immigration anywhere. I believe that anybody should be able to live anywhere they want if they follow the right rules and procedures and protocol to live in that particular country. And I just think that, for example, in the United States, immigration was welcomed. In fact, if you look at the earnings per group of people, I wish I had the numbers in front of me, but I would say the first five. So Indians, Eastern Indians are the number one income earning population, followed by Koreans, followed by Japanese and Chinese. And so it's like 5 different Asian immigrant groups have the highest median income. And I think Caucasians are 6th and African Americans are 8th or 9th in that group. And so my point is that I believe in that. I believe that's a very good thing, because I think that bringing the best and the brightest from all around the world is always good. But when you have a an economy that necessarily can't support that, then that gives to a rise of xenophobia, and that gives a rise to, saying it's those people is the reason why I don't have my job. So I'd be very careful about introducing other people from around the world to come in, but intellectually and sociologically, I like that concept. Economically, I think you've got to be very pragmatic and really think that through.
And I think that that's a big topic of conversation on how to handle immigration correctly in today's world. And that's a big challenge. It's not, America's not the only country dealing with immigration problems. I mean, it's a fever pitch in the UK, in a lot of European countries, even in Mexico. You were bringing up the statistics, right? In terms of households headed by people who identify as Asian, had the highest median household income in 2023, 112,000. Households headed by Hispanics, 65,000. Black, 56,000. Had the lowest in 2023. So in terms of individual full-time wage, by 2025, Asian was the highest again. Whites, blacks, Hispanics. That's how that flows. And what I've seen here a lot, especially as you see the immigration thing, you're right. Most people don't look at that effect. Immigration is very welcomed. Everybody needs immigration, and the United States was built on that. When people say, "Oh, we were built on the hands open, the wide hand," come here and take, let me your burden and all that everyone wants to talk about all the time, but the reality is that when people were coming to America, they're coming to for an opportunity to build. My ancestors, Italian and Irish, Scotchmen, shipbuilding and things like that. They came here to build, and America was built. And when you look at the immigration that's happening today in America, a lot of it is not good. A lot of it's not good. I mean, you just had that incident in California where the guy that was here illegally on the 10, right? You saw that, right?
You heard about that? That was 10 minutes away from my house. So for those of you that don't know what he's talking about.
You're on that freeway, Len. You are on that freeway, Len.
Every other day. Every other day I'm on that freeway. Yeah. So for those of you that don't know what we're talking about, a couple of days before this recording, there was a gentleman driving a car, and we saw the perspective of his dash cam, and he rear-ended a person who ran into another truck, and then he veered off and hit another person. So 3 people were killed. And what's so crazy is that the guy and his wife, I was walking with the gentleman just this morning. He knows that person, went to the same church as him. And he said he's, salt of the earth guy, loved his wife. His wife was really sweet. They made a lot of donations to their church and gave of their time. He was a coach. And if you see the violence of that crash, it was tragic. It was tragic. Now, here's the thing. What's crazy, I understand that the person was here illegally and had some criminal backgrounds or stuff like that. And I think, and it was a DUI situation. And so, like if I'm part of that community, I'm thinking, dude, bro, you making us look bad, bro, because that's just, it's so tragic. And then with all of the heated rhetoric that's happening and all of the heated fighting that's happening as it relates to immigration and all of those things, anything you do, if you're a part of one of those groups that are being targeted, it's not good. And so it's a real shame about what happened, man, because it was tragic. But anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to give some context to what you were talking about.
No, I always appreciate that because it lays right down into it, and it just adds to the substance of it. Because most people don't. We always want to talk about and put focus on the rights of those trying to immigrate here, and then the rights of those who are here illegally. But then we don't talk about the rights that were infringed on the persons that were killed as a result, who were here legally, who were doing everything right, who were model citizens in regards to what we know, right? Based on the information you just provided. But now their rights are infringed on and they didn't even have a choice. So that is where you kind of look at it and go, you got to protect the productive people of your land. I mean, Japan has one of the most strictest immigration policies. New Zealand has one of the strictest immigration policies. All these countries have very strict immigration policies. So it pains me to see people in America not educate themselves and just be very ignorant about immigration and not actually study this and look at this and think America's evil, because we're not. We actually have a very forgiving immigration system and very forgiving system compared to a lot of other countries. So, and I know that's by grandstanding with America, but you absolutely have to monitor, because for the most part, what was happening in America, and I'm very firm on this, you can't convince me otherwise because you just look at the data, we were getting a lot of people from a lot of countries that those host countries did not want. They didn't. So I'm not saying there's a lot of truth to the whole that we're getting everybody's worst, and people who said that. But there is some truth to the fact that we got a lot of people in this country over the last few years that were not the best of the best, and certainly would not have been allowed in this country if we were very much so more systematically tighter on that and saying, yes, we welcome everyone to come to America, but look, you got to come in here and do your part too. You got to come in here and do your fair share as well, and you got to be a productive member of the society and the community. And I don't have to worry about you killing my son or my daughter because you're weird, and not saying weird in an insulting way, but just because you just want to do that stuff because you want to act like an animal. I'm sorry. There are certain human beings in the world today that live in Western countries and live in civilized areas of the world that are animals, and they need to stay in those areas of the world because we don't want the animals here.
Yeah.
And I know it's a very inhumane way to talk about it, but when someone stabs someone on a train without any remorse or disregard, and just walks away, that's an animal.
Okay.
That is an animal. Right? So I mean,
I just think that it's real problematic to use dehumanizing language for any human being on any circumstances. While I don't disagree with you about the acts are heinous, and I don't disagree with you about the fact that we should have more stringent immigration policies. I'm with you 100% on that. Here's the problem. In the United States, we have a history of taking bad actions on people who have been marginalized and dehumanized. And I'm not just talking about the African American community. I'm talking about the Asian community. I'm talking about the Latino community. I'm talking about the Jewish community. And what happens is when we use that kind of language, what happens is, like, you can use it. I'm talking about you specifically, Chris. You, Chris Philp, can use that language from the standpoint of saying, okay, I use it on purpose because I'm applying logic to it, not because I look at this entire group of people through that lens of being an animal or things like that. You look at it as an individual act. What I'm saying to you, Chris, is that it's imperative to be conscientious about the words you use, because other people who aren't as informed as you, who aren't as educated as you, can use that as a way to justify hurting and killing and doing things to other people, because America's has had a history of that. And when I say America, I'm talking about people within America. People have been, shot and killed that are innocent. They didn't do anything, but because they look like somebody from that group, or they're from that group as an individual, the overwhelming majority of immigrants come here legally and lawfully. There are large numbers of people that are immigrants that come here illegally because, again, I agree with you that we do need to have more stringent and more strict laws, but it's really important to know that most people live according to the laws of the land. And if you remove the entire immigrant community, America's not America anymore. And this economy would fall. Think about it like this. Imagine every single immigrant that lives in America right now wakes up tomorrow and says, you know what? I stand with the people who are being harassed by ICE. I stand in solidarity with them, and I'm not showing up to work. I'm not coming, and I'm not being a productive member because I want you to feel our contribution. What would happen to America in 30 days if all the immigrants decided to unite and do that?
I don't think you see anything because the ones that are here legally would be happy for the ones that are here illegally to be gone.
Okay, but no. That wasn't my question. My question is if the people, the immigrants who are here legally decided out of solidarity decided not to show up to work because they wanted to send a message to say you can't marginalize an entire group of people for the transgressions of a small percentage. What would happen in the next 30 days?
Oh, well, yeah, you'd have a big issue, but
Absolutely.
I don't think those people would move that way because those people feel marginalized by the fact that we're letting people in here without doing the same due process that they went through. So they feel like, wait a minute, I went through the due process to come here to be a model, not to be a model citizen, but be a good citizen and be productive. But now I feel marginalized because all these guys that are not even over here doing the right thing are being let in with and not having to do the stuff that I had to go in. So I think that's the perspective. And absolutely, you're absolutely right, Len. I don't look at it from that perspective, what you said in regards to a group of people.
I know that because I know you.
I say they're an animal simply because I watch the actions. Now, I'm not saying they're animals because of the way they look. I'm saying they're animals because of the way they act.
I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying just be careful of your words because other people that don't know you can misconstrue that. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, 100. Oh, no, 100%. 100%. And again, for clarity as well on that, for me, it's about actions, right? Actions is really like, I don't care what anybody says. I want to see what you do. I want to see your action. So to me, action speaks always louder. So for those who come over here, for those who are here legally, I think they want the better opportunity. And you see a lot of those people speaking out on social media today that are here legally going like it just doesn't make any sense for you to come here and not assimilate and not say, hey, I'm going to become an American. And that's a big thing you see in a lot of European countries today where no one knows what it's like no one knows what it is to be French anymore. Or English anymore, because it's not where you have people coming in to these countries that want to come and be British or want to be French. They want to get rid of those people. So there's a big thing happening a lot around the world with that people really don't realize and don't see with that. And that's where you got to be careful with it. And you got to read between the lines. Look, there's a reason why those countries have those strict immigration policies, but at the same token, there's a reason why those countries are suffering from low and declining birth rates. So you need a healthy balance, I think, of that inflow and outflow of healthy immigration, healthy, productive, legal immigration, where there's a system there where everyone comes in and they can be treated equally under the law of the land. But when you come here illegally, you're already breaking the law, and you're already setting that precedence, and that's where a lot of people have that problem where it's like, well, if you can break a law there at that small level, then that means you can break a law at a bigger level. And let's not even say that's small. For some countries, if you immigrate to them illegally, that's like death sentence in some countries, or like 10 years or 15 years. You're in the slammer. So I think that the diluting is important. And I think you mentioned that because if you have people come from other countries, they dilute those local small countries. And then you end up happening is you lose the culture aspect there. I'm afraid of that happening in a lot of other established countries as well. I think it's happening everywhere, but eventually everybody will be mixed together. So I'm curious to know, Len, your perspective on this, because you see this. Why haven't we seen, or why hasn't there been a massive African state or African country that has just blossomed to become industrialized like you've seen in the rest of the westernized world? Or why have you not seen that happen yet on that continent? What is, besides South Africa, and I'm not sure, I'm not educated, by the way, I'm very ignorant to how the geopolitically it works there, but I'm curious because I know you're a little bit more enlightened on that. How is that, why have we not seen, because I know you touched on it earlier, why have we not seen a superpower or something emerge from that continent? Why has that not happened yet? I'm curious to know why that hasn't happened.
I think we would really need to do an entire podcast on that topic, but I'll give you a couple of.
What's the Reader's Digest, and then maybe we can look at that and explore that topic, because I would be interested to know the history of that as to why that happened that way.
Yeah. So in 1948, there was a Berlin conference that took place, and this is where European nations got together and decided how to carve up Africa for the different countries. And so colonialism has existed in Africa longer than slavery has existed here in the United States. And so what ended up happening is you had this major influx of European merchants go into Africa and negotiate trade with the local chiefs and local rulers. And what ended up happening is they recognized all of the resources that the continent had, the natural resources, and they decided to go and exploit those for years and years. And even to this day, you have countries like Senegal, who's under the rulership of France. And so what ends up happening is many African countries, they grow the natural resources, and then they ship them over to Europe and China and the United States on a lesser extent. Those countries manufacture those goods and then sell their own resources back to Africa at a significantly higher price. And so because the means of manufacturing production happens outside of the continent of Africa, they don't have the capacity to grow their own food and their own resources, manufacture them and send them off, because other companies and other countries have taken that part of the means of production outside, and all of the riches from Africa bleed into other continents. So you look at colonialism, so that's a political economic situation that took place. And then you have the trade, which is purely economic, which is really, really hurt the continent of Africa in a big way. So when you look at their main needs there is just the ability to control the means of production so they can take their own infrastructure and begin to make manufacturing of goods and services so they can make the money. That's the Reader's Digest of it. But there's so much of a deep history where even to this day, you had companies like Shell go into Nigeria and Kenya and Ghana and extract the oil, make it into gas, sell it for a profit, and the people that produce the actual raw material didn't even benefit from it. And so you see that still to this day. And some countries are now in the process where they're saying, look, other countries, if you are not an African country, you can't do mining here. You can't do drilling here. You can't extract our natural resources. So little by little, the continent is starting to wake up. And so what I believe is when you look at this growing population of young people that are more socially and politically and connected to the global stage, they understand that Africa is the world's most resource rich continent by far. And if they can begin to control how they produce those resources, they can actually become a player on the world stage. But it's as if those countries that are extracting the wealth, they don't want to stop that, because if you are my teat, if you will, if you are my golden goose, and the golden goose is saying, wait a minute, I need to keep this for my own kids, and you own that golden goose, you're not going to give that up without a fight. So I'm really interested to see what Africa is going to do over the next 30 to 50 years, because, my concern is that the continents and the other countries that control a lot of the trade that's happening right now is going to push back the more Africa decides to rise up. Because I don't know if you know or not, there's 54 countries in Africa. Africa is huge. It's Huge. Yes.
Huge.
If you take China, if you take the US and the UK, that fits in like the area of like the top part of Africa. It's crazy how big it is. So, yeah.
Massive untapped land of resources. And it's interesting because you go back to it's like systemic colonialism, trade, going back to the like 1800s, still has a lasting control over a country that has allowed it not to control its supply chain. Has allowed an entire continent not to control its own. It's like pretty much robbing the sovereign wealth of your country.
That's exactly what it is.
Back to them.
That's exactly what it is.
Their sovereign wealth.
That's exactly what it is.
And that's really like a lot of people look at that today. That's happening in America today, right? You're fleecing the sovereign wealth of America, and no one's getting, and people are starving and they can't get their snaps.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund that loans them money, and they charge them an interest rate that's so exorbitant that they'll never be able to pay it back. And so that's
trapping people in the endless debt cycle.
That's
we talk about those things. If you've never read the book Creature from Jekyll Island, I highly suggest you read it. It's a fascinating story about how the Federal Reserve was started and why and where and what and just the evilnesses of it. But I mean, I think it just, going back and talking about, populations and people and not dating and young minds and young kids, because I know we were talking about this extensively and I saw this just the other day when I was like, you see young adults today that are struggling, late 20s, early 30s. They're struggling to get married or struggling to find partners or get into relationships. And it's like, you see this proliferation. I know we were talking about this, the proliferation of what boys and young men's, the standards they have to live up to, or the 50% culture. And what are you bringing to the table? Right. It's like, I have a 19-year-old daughter. She's trying to find a date, and all these young boys she goes on a date with, and we're in a good area. It's like, well, what do you bring to the table? Or I'm looking for someone who's going to be a 50% spouse. And I'm like, when did it change where this mindset of young men expect that a woman is going to pay for 50% of the date? And a young woman is going to add, what do you bring to the table as a dating question? But then on the flip side, you have the proliferation of women selling themselves, a young group of young women thinking that, their physical beauty and their assets is to be sold, and you can make millions on the internet. Like this, you see it happening what does that do to the psyche of young girls 10, 20, 30 years from now? What does that do to the psyche of young boys 20, 30 years from now? No one knows how to talk to each other or date anymore. Like a lasting psychological effect of that. What are your thoughts on that? Because it's pretty, I know you have young men in that age group too, young boys in that age group, sons in that age group too. And it just seems like that late 20s, early 30s are just struggling today, but you see obviously the examples of what's going on with that. What are your thoughts on that, Len?
Yeah, it's interesting because you talked about the whole birth rate thing, and I really think that's connected. I think if you fast forward that whole trajectory, I think because of the fact that young boys don't have the same skill sets of understanding what it's like to face rejection, understanding what it's like to be a protector and a provider, understanding what it's like to really be a man in every sense of the word. There's no way in the world
but let me stop you there before you get into it.
Okay.
I think this is such a big important point here, because this is what I think is a problem today, is because you said what it is to be a man, and you emphasize that.
Yes.
You emphasize what it takes to be a man, because you emphasize that, as you should, from your generation, because there's oomph in there. Yeah. 13-year-olds were leading battalions in the 1800s. I'm not saying that has to happen today.
Right.
But what it is to be a man, I don't think we know what that is anymore. And when you get rid of the men and the protectors, that allows the forces of evil to get to the women and the children. Go ahead, Len. Sorry, because you made an emphasis on a man. That's the point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, okay, so there are a couple of statistics that I wanted to bring up, because there's so many related topics. So I look at mental health for men. I look at COVID for young men and what they went through. And I look at social media because of what young boys are exposed to. So, and I really want to be careful because I don't want to be the old guy that said back in my day, things were so much different, but there is a reality to the way in which people raise their kids, and their kids were exposed to a much more narrow scope of ideas and ideologies. And so social media took that narrow scope. So back in the day before you had social media, you had television, but you didn't have influence. You had shows and entertainment. Now you have people using their thoughts and their ideas to infiltrate the thinking of people, which impacts the way they view the world. And so, the men in my life were people who so directly into me because I watched them. I watched their actions. I saw what they did on a day-to-day basis. And so as I've taught before, I prided myself on having a circle of mentors. I had a mentor in my spiritual life. I had a mentor in my business life. I had a mentor in my personal life who was my father. And my father was also my mentor as it related to being a giver and also sowing seeds into other people and being selfless. My father mentored me like that. Now, even though my mom and my dad divorced when I was a year and a half, but I still had my father's influence. I didn't have somebody that I was looking at giving me a curated version of their lives. My dad was in my life. My dad poured into me. My pastor poured into me. Mentors in business poured into me. And so those deposits gave me a perspective of the world that allowed me to process the information they were giving me. Now, take that as a parenthetical, put it on the side. Imagine the amount of people that are in from 11 to about 19, that impressionable time when you're really starting to like girls, where you're really starting to have a certain perception of yourself as it relates to the world around you, as it relates to you developing from a boy into adolescence and all of the peer pressure that you would once get just from your high school friends. Imagine the thousands of hours that they spend looking at other people who are only projecting what they want the world to see through a camera lens. And because they're getting this perspective, they don't really understand what's real. And so because of that, when you have a small, like, for example, you and we're probably one of a couple of million podcasters, right? And so there are a lot of different voices that people gravitate toward. Whereas when you and I were growing up, we had 5 or 6. And so you have the small percentage of people who decided to go on an airwave. And oftentimes those perspectives are the most extreme perspectives, because most men that I know, they're not talking about what do you bring to the table. They're not asking their girl. There's no way in the world that my sons would ask their girl to pay for their meal. Now, some of the women that they date might say, hey, I got it this time. No problem. But that's not the default position. The default position is not to ask them what they bring to the table. And so what happened as a result of these curated lives bombarding my mental space that's halting my development from a boy to a man? This is the outcome. 79% of suicides in the United States are men, according to CDC in 2025. Men age 30. Did you hear what I just said? 79%.
Whoa.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yes. When I saw that figure, it blew my mind.
That is crazy.
Yes, exactly. And I believe with my entire being that people are taking their lives because they're comparing themselves through the lens of somebody else's life that's only giving you a piece of it. I saw a picture on Instagram the other day and it showed an apple, right? And so there was a mirror in front of the apple. And so in the mirror shows this beautiful red apple, right? But on the other side, the apple was cut in half, but you couldn't see that side because the only side they showed was to the mirror. You getting the picture that I'm painting to you?
100%.
Yes.
So
and
is it almost like too much choice? Because my son Emery posts a lot, and he did like a dump, like a monthly or a weekly dump.
Okay.
And there's somebody and he's 14. Somebody commented, the top comment was, "Your life is so much more better than compared to mine." And I sat and I read that and I was like, dang, that's some deep stuff there, dude.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So is it too much choice and too much comparing?
It's too much comparing, because what we like, even me and you, like, we're not going to talk about all the crap that we go through on a regular basis because people don't want to hear about that. So the reality is that all of us, we are showing a caricature of our true selves in the most intimate sense of the word, right? Like when I'm by myself, man, I do dumb stuff because I'm by myself, right? I'm never going to put that on camera. And the same thing is true. So when people see other people on camera projecting this lifestyle or projecting a certain persona, they're only receiving that tidbit of information, which is a fraction of who those people really are, because we know our faults, we know our shortcomings, we know our transgressions, we know our dirty little secrets, we know all of those things, but we only see other people's best versions of themselves. And so we're left comparing our flaws that we know about against their perfection, which is fake because they don't know about their flaws. I say this all the time, and I'll wrap up so you can jump in. If I put the most embarrassing thing on camera, everybody would judge me all day, every day. And the same is true for you and 100% of everybody else walking the face of the planet, not named Jesus.
Hey, amen to that. So it's almost like the proliferation of content and the proliferation of people's lives. It's just everything looks fake, or everything looks perfect, and the world's not perfect. And people live up to that expectation, or that it becomes depressing or it becomes daunting because I can't measure up to that. I can't be like that guy. I can't be like that gal. And then that just becomes the mindset. And I think we're just putting people into that because you and I didn't have that. You and I did not have. I mean, we had it naturally in that, like,
amongst our peers. Yeah.
Oh man, Susie Q's going to take Joey to the dance because Joey plays football and I don't, and Joey's buff and I'm not. Mm-hmm. Right. But it's okay because Joey's going to drink a 6-pack and get fat. And when I get out of school, I'm going to get in shape and I'm going to get smart to start a company and I'm going to make money and you're going to want. That's the revenge. That's the revenge of the smart kid, right? That's
right. The revenge of the nerds. Yeah, that's right.
Hey, look, you know what? Life is better when you're a late bloomer. I'm just going to leave that out there. Put that out to the audience and tell you that life is better when you're a late bloomer, right? I think a lot of kids, they you're right. They live up to that expectation, that false expectation that this is the world and it's got to be perfect and all the right angles. But what they don't realize, and that a lot of people realize or have to realize, is that everything has side effects. And what I mean by that is it's always a package deal, right? So you might look at somebody's life and go, dang, that's cool. But what you don't realize is that there's a side effect or a package deal that comes with it. There's an adverse that comes with that great thing you're seeing. There's always adverse effect. There's always. Mm-hmm. Even drinking water has an adverse side effect. You could drink too much and die. So just even pure oxygen is deadly. So think about, right? Think about what when you look at that and you process that, and that's what we have to teach people is like, or not teach people, but people need to, I had to understand that helped me was like, bro, that looks nice, but what comes with it, baby? And that's what, people would ask me all the time. It's like, how come you never had any feelings? You've been married for 16 years. You were always around a lot of, I was always in a lot of opportunities. Our business that we used to be involved in. You were in opportunities where you're around women that are attractive, and not just physically attractive, but are mentally attractive. And when people always ask, well, what makes you, what would make you, not even think about that, right? Well, I mean, obviously you think about it, but what makes you really process is you go, man, this ain't worth it. I don't even want to learn all that other garbage that comes with that because I know they come with garbage. Man, you got to watch and stay away from the shiny things because the shiny things need to be cleaned like the current shiny things you have. So do yourself a favor, right?
I agree.
Do yourself a favor.
I think what happened is that COVID really did a number on us because I believe that's where the proliferation of this different dynamic between men and women really got bad because we got internet savvy to the fact that, we got brave because we could sit behind a computer. And as a result of that, we lost our ability as social beings to really understand that whole social dynamic. And so women have become more masculine and bring that dominant alpha male energy to the table because, a lot of them believe that they've got to bring something to the table nowadays. They can't just be a person that says, you know what, I'm going to bring my feminine energy to this relationship. I'm going to bring my ability to bring peace after you've had a hard day of work. So you don't have to walk in to somebody nagging at you or shoving the kids in your face the moment you walk in the door. I'm going to bring a submissive mindset, not because I have to, but because I want to, because you go out and you go earn and you go and you protect this family. We've really drifted away from those norms. And there's nothing wrong with two spouses working. My wife works and my wife makes six figures just by herself, right? And I love the fact that she has that passion about what she does. With that, though, she doesn't bring masculine male energy to our household. And our household, when there's a decision that gets to be made, we'll have a discussion, but we both know that ultimately it's my decision to make. Now, oftentimes, we'll make a decision and I'm wrong and I'll look back and be like, babe, you were right. Because that's what 29 years of marriage does. And when you marry someone who's wise, you learn to listen to them because they bring wisdom to the table. But when you look at kids that were suffering from COVID, so many of them were isolated. There's a statistic that says 1 in 4 men report often feeling isolated. When you feel isolated, what does that do? That increases anxiety. And then when you go online and you see all of these people judging every little thing you do, we feel like we have to be fake and put our best thing out there. Like when you were talking about, someone being an animal, I came back and said, well, because I know you, because the little thing they'll do is they'll take a sound bite and they'll judge you for it. And so because of that, people have learned that you can't just be free on a platform like this because you'll get crucified. And so people project fakeness on this place. And so they lose their ability to go up and walk up to a young lady and ask her for her phone number and feel okay with being rejected. And they get in these little echo chambers where it's a bunch of dudes that have been rejected that don't know how to talk to girls. And so then they demonize women and they dehumanize women. And now you've got this group of people and that's all they're hearing all day. And then what do? They bring in these few examples of women that are scandalous or that are selling their bodies and that are doing bad things to themselves. And they say, see, that's who women are. No, you're just looking at a small subset because your echo chamber is feeding you the worst examples to reinforce some preconceived notion. And I think COVID just really, really messed that up with us.
COVID led to the proliferation of a lot of different things and the rise to a lot of different things that COVID was definitely a one-door decision. Once that door was open and that decision was made to do the lockdowns and everything, you could never undo that ever again. No matter how much money and how much government oversight and programs and case studies and think tanks you throw at it, you will forever have a schism or a blip in the freaking blip. Like, wait, like you go back and you study human history 200 years from now, 100 years from now, and you look at that and you go, what happened here? Blip, and you're going to go, oh, this weird, wacky moment where everyone decided to be weird and wacky.
Yep.
And you're going to come back and you're going to look at that. But there's always a history of weird and wacky decisions that people made and weird and wacky occurrences and events that happen in the world. So I don't think you're ever going to get rid of that. But it's funny.
But when you have such a world phenomenon all at the same time, you know, like in Europe, you had the bubonic plague, but that was in one segment of the world, right?
This is global.
Yes. Even with the Spanish flu, it was a pandemic, but the repercussions were that we were not all connected. Regional. That's right. That's exactly right.
The first time you had a global, and it was a mental global impact.
Yes.
I mean, yes, not to take away from the people who passed away from
of course,
comorbidities with contracting COVID.
Yeah.
But the mental health impact and detriment and the reset. But studies conclusively still show that when men and women are in traditional roles in a relationship and in a family unit, they are always the most happy.
And they live the longest as well.
And they live the longest. So I'm like, every morning, I'm not even telling you, when we get up, Mary and I, we talk to each other every day throughout the day. Every day, I guarantee you, every day, every single day, there's not a day that goes by that either of us will look at each other and goes, I think we can make it to 100. I think we can make it. I think we can freaking make it. I think we can freaking make it, baby. I think we can make it. And when you have two people in a family unit that's working together, and you look at how family units are built, and you look at how family dynasties are built, these wealthy families that no one ever wants to. By the way, the wealthiest people in the world, you don't know who they are.
That's right.
No one knows who they are. You just don't. And they're families. They are families, and you don't even know who they are because the family's name is so. There's so many married in and so many connected names that you don't even know. It's layered. But you know, you look at it, and you look at it with most families, and what they do is that everybody works with each other, and everybody contributes back to the family's name, and everyone is supporting each other, and everyone is close and living together, either compound living or not. Everyone is tight. And everyone's investing in each other, supporting each other, encouraging each other, lifting up each other, loving each other. You see this in the certain cultures in the world that are very productive. I don't want to get into those, mention any names, but you see it. It happens very often. It's very systemic. And you wonder, why are they so successful? Because family is always the most important thing.
That's right.
And when you look at blue zones across the world, social connections, specifically spousal and family connections, when there's tight connections, that's the only common denominator amongst all blue zones. So if you want to stay happy and healthy, you got to have a strong family unit. You got to have a strong household. And as we kind of wrap up today, and just to kind of emphasize that, going into the month of, ending October and having the trick or treats and the Halloweens and whatever it is that you're celebrating, and then going into what I would say is arguably the most family, most conjoined times of the year, obviously with holidays and Thanksgiving and whatever spiritual beliefs you are. For me, it's Christmas. This is the time when you really, really ought to look at that and reflect on that and think, dang, like, maybe I ought to get back, or maybe I got to get closer with somebody that I wasn't close with. Maybe I ought to forgive. Maybe I ought to just improve my relationships that I already have instead of trying to go out into the world and make new empty ones with people who really don't care about you. Go back and try to maybe heal the relationships that have known you since, you were a kid and didn't filter yourself and didn't put a mask on, that really know who you are, and go out there and maybe try to repair those and forgive those. And even if it's like you can't repair it, then do some forgiving so that you can go into next year with a clear, productive mind to really get to where you want to be in a real sense, not a fake sense, not what social media told you to do or the internet told you to do or AI told you to do, but what you in your heart you wanted to do. So just kind of where I'm at right now to wrap up today as we kind of end today's session, Lynn.
I love that. And, when you talk about the importance of rekindling relationships, I think sometimes kids look at their parents and some of the transgressions and evil things they did. if you can find it in your heart, if you're a child of an aging parent, I want you to imagine for a second to that parent passed away. Did you say everything and do everything that you could have done now that they're still alive, because you don't want to be in a situation where there was something that you should have said and apologized or forgiven or rekindled or reconnected? If you have that opportunity while they're still alive, don't miss this opportunity to do that, because don't allow your ego and the difficult challenges that you went through stop you. Because if they passed away today and you would feel guilt for the rest of your life, use that as a sign to go and have that conversation with them. Now, if they ultimately brush you off from there, at least you can rest assured knowing that I can sleep on a soft pillow tonight, knowing that I did my part. So that's what I would say, just to piggyback on what you're saying, Chris. And for those of you that tuned in, please feel free to like and subscribe and comment and do all that stuff that people ask for on YouTube. We definitely want to get this word out to as many people in this growing audience that we have. And each week we'll get better and continue to bring you great content and realistic content and relevant content and current content. And our goal is to make sure that if you listen and follow us, that you're going to learn applicable things in your life that will enhance the quality of your life. And so with that being said, Chris, it's good to talk to you as well as always. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Conversation has given you clarity on your next steps. Please share this episode with someone who's walking the same path. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss future episodes. And remember, planning ahead isn't just prudent, it's an act of care. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on The Family Office.
Thing